Hello squids, one more day of riding. I'm on the crf250, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about some of the weaknesses of this bike as I see it. One of the big downsides of this bike are the tubes in the tires. I know that this is a dual sport, and most of these bikes with 21-inch front wheel and 18 rear, they all have tubes. But if you have ever gotten flats, and I assume a lot of people have, it's much easier to fix a tubeless tire than a tube tire. And I don't really carry tire levers when I'm riding, and I would hate to have a flat on this thing. It's kind of weird because the technology for mountain biking has gone with tubeless tires, tubeless wheels now, but yet these dual sports still have the tubes inside. So I kind of feel that you need to start upgrading. I know that it's a lot more permanent putting in a tube if you get a flat, but most riders are not going to be riding in crazy off-road conditions, and I certainly don't carry tire levers and a way of propping the bike up. I don't have a way of removing the axle. The tubeless stuff is way better for the average rider, in my opinion. This bike gets 90 miles per gallon, and that's a pro. But the problem is, if you start heading on the highway and you're approaching 60, 70 miles an hour, it drops down to like, I don't know, 60 something, I think. So the range is not going to be that great. And that's usually with, even with scooters, they get 100 miles per gallon. If you are really like maxing it out all the time, you're not going to get great efficiency. Even if you're going at the speed of a car. But cars at speed are much more aerodynamic, so they're actually more efficient than motorcycles. This thing is very efficient at low speeds, and that's about it. Another weakness is it's got a lot of plastic, and the plastic looks great. I love how this bike looks. But as you found out in my off-roading adventure, I dropped this bike 3 times on that. It's like a goat trail, really, like rocky. And this bike handles pretty well for something this heavy. But with the amount of plastic, you're going to be breaking things off. And that's why if you intend on doing any off-roading, you might want to pick the standard crf300 and 250 rather than this one. Because I don't like the idea of fixing plastics. You know, there are riders that they'll get this and they'll just go off-road, drop it, and that's just the name of the game. But unfortunately, I am not that type. This costs way too much money for me. This is an expensive bike. Another weakness is that this thing has got a metal gas tank, so if you drop it in a certain way with a certain rock, you could dent this tank, and that's going to be putting a damper on your love of this bike. Another weakness of this bike is that if your friends have anything, including like a 400cc DRZ 400, you're not going to be able to really keep up in the road. If they're like hauling ass on the road, this bike just doesn't have that sort of speed to keep up with bikes. On the weekends, I would do maybe a 400-mile ride into West Virginia, just a one-day ride, 400, 500, 600 miles. This is definitely not capable of doing that. And another downside is that this bike, when you reach a certain RPM, it's going to start vibrating a little bit, and you feel the vibration from the foot pegs and the handlebars. This is a very smooth bike, but it just has that weird tingling coming across. Now, if you got better shoes with a little bit more absorption in the soles, then you would not feel it as much, but it's still evident. If you are a red light like this bike does not take off fast. So any car, including that Tesla that wants to race you, you're not going to be able to win. Even a Toyota Corolla is probably faster than this. And another thing to consider is this bike has got such a narrow profile. You have a little bit of a psychological thing happening with drivers. Drivers can see right through you, so they kind of will intimidate you and tailgate you. I've noticed this with small motorcycles. Look at this lady. Hey, stop making U-turns, lady. Another big downside is that this bike, if you take it to some parts of Washington or any inner city, this bike is a jackable bike. What is, that guy just honked at me. Why did he honk at me? 7-Eleven. Puppies. Oh, puppies no longer. The rear suspension on this is really soft, and it would be nice to have some more adjustment for the suspension. But of course, like, one thing that you have to keep in mind is that this bike is marketed as a beginner bike, and the suspension feels like it's a beginner bike. When I was riding off-road, it was adequate, but I think if I started to move faster, you would see the limitations of this. And on the road, if I'm trying to like go around a corner and there's a little bit of a dip in the corner, this thing almost feels like it's bottoming out. It just wobbles around. You know, comfort on this is pretty good, but we're approaching the winter, and this is going to be a terrible winter bike. This little windscreen works pretty well. You know, if you've ridden a bike without a windscreen, you automatically know if you have just a little bit of deflector, it makes things much easier. By the way, how's my microphone compared to the old videos? I upgraded my microphone on the GoPro. Feels like that I'm just complaining about this bike, but in reality, I really enjoy it, because I bought it mostly to trailer to areas and to do more exploring smaller roads. But it can't be your only bike because it's so limited. It feels like it's a specialty item. So if you buy this, it's a great bike, and the 250 is a much better deal than the 300. And it's really the same bike, but I think the 300's got a few more horsepower and maybe just a few other things. I've never ridden the 300, but I feel that by getting the older version, you always get a much better deal. So that's why I always get these older versions, and I just don't have that much money, so it always makes sense. And I think manufacturers are just trying to sell you the same bike with a new number, so you think you're getting a new bike. You know, because if they said it was a 2020 crf250, you go like, oh, okay, it's the same bike, so I'll just keep my 250. But a lot of manufacturers have been keen to change the displacement often, and I believe that's why they picked the Transalp 750. You know, because they could have picked 650, stuck with that same 650 that's been so popular. So they just want to make something that falls in that displacement, and then they'll just keep changing that displacement every 4 years. So you upgrade, so you feel like you're getting a completely new upgraded bike, but in reality you're not getting an upgraded bike, you're just getting the same thing with different outfits. That's how I feel about the CRF 250 and 300. It's really the same bike. You're not going to be a better rider in the 300, but that's how marketing works, and I used to work in marketing, so I understand these strategies. This would be more of a road that this bike likes. I like these sort of roads that have up and downs. Oh, you see that deer? Usually when there's one, there's another. It does really well on gravel roads. I think you start to see the weakness when it starts getting into trails, but for gravel roads, it's really good. But any bike can really do gravel, but it depends the speed that you're doing. Oh, And we have a creek. I don't want to get too wet, so I'm going to slow down. That's one way of not getting wet, getting your feet up. Takes a little bit of practice to do that. Man, I love doing that. But here's the thing, going around these corners, it becomes kind of wobbly the way the suspension. Ooh, road narrows, I love that. Front brake is so mushy. Look how far this goes in. Really mushy front end when braking. But you know, otherwise it's a pretty decent bike to ride. But brakes, yeah, they're terrible. You need to clutch it to wheelie. You see how much this kind of goes in? If you're street riding, you don't want the front end to dive in every time you hit the front brake. Look at this fancy lad. Hey. Yamaha, that's a lady. There's that airplane. I think that Yamaha is the XRS or something. I want that bike, I really like it. She seems like she's a new rider. I'm going to back up a little bit and give her space. I don't like it when people get on my wheel. Let's see what this bike can do here. Miles, 70 miles an hour. I'm going by the GPS. Oh, that's my top gear. 75, 76. Oh my god, this thing's so slow. 75 miles an hour. I get 76, 77, 78. Nope, I'm going 82 on the Speedo. It's 77 right now. I can't get any more speed. This is it. 77 miles an hour. That's the top speed. 77 on a flat. Wow. Okay. Hey, honestly, that's not bad. 77 on the GPS. Top speed is really not this bike's forte. Hey, look at that bike. GSXR? Yeah. You do not see GSXRs very much these days. Where's the road at? Look at that, it ends here. What? Wow, what is this? Holy cow. I've never been here. Wait a minute, I have been here. I was just here. That's funny. This is what photographers call the golden hour. When the sun starts to go down, it's like golden like this. You see, the suspension is just so sloppy. Well, it's about to get dark, and we're about to find out how good these headlights are. Gotta put her in the right gear and squeeze on out of there. That didn't get too wet. Well, it's not quite night, so you can't see the headlights perform, but either way, the camera just can't capture accurately what the headlights can do, but it's pretty decent, and it's definitely much better than the Super Tenray's headlights, which is hard to believe because this bike is kind of like a budget bike. Gas is $3.79. Look at those headlights. And the best thing, the headlight doesn't go into the rear view of cars. Alright guys, thanks for watching. That's some of the cons of this bike. I like this bike, but I just want to share some of the bad things I see about it. Those are just my opinions, of course. It's a great bike. It makes a great bike for a lot of people. So thanks for watching guys. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber, you go and do something like this. And totally redeem yourself!